Are you talking shift? We are. It's time for the We're Talking Shift podcast. Now. Here to talk shift, Loree Bischoff. We're Talking Shift.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast where all we do is talk shift, because when we feel stuck or when we're ready to level up, we have to shift. And I believe that process begins with our thinking. A shift in our outer world starts with a shift in our inner world. And that, my friends, is the antidote to feeling stuck. Today on episode 58 of We're Talking Shift, I am going to be speaking with Noemi Grace. Noemi Grace. I keep saying her name over and over because it is so pretty. I just love it. Now, Noemi is a psychotherapist and a soul healer who channels new perspectives from the divine on unconditional self-love, forgiveness, divine grace, and life's purpose. Her new book, An Intimate Dialogue with God, The Miraculous Power of Unconditional Self-Love, shares her transformative communication with God and her experience of applying the divine messages to her own life. Noemi is passionate about sharing these beautiful, uplifting messages and helping people to heal patterns, wounds, and losses that have been resistant to healing. A unique aspect of her work is that she channels answers to people's burning questions directly from the divine. So I know that this is very intriguing, and I'm excited to get to it and share this deliciousness with y'all. So Noemi, welcome to We're Talking Shift.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here, Loree, and I'm looking forward to the deliciousness too. That's what a wonderful introduction.
Yes, no, absolutely. Your book is delightful. It is, well, we're going to get into it. It's just got so many, it's not a big fat book. It's not like, it's not like A Course in Miracles with 2,000 pages or something. But it's so full of really, really awesome messages and wisdom in less than, I can't remember how many pages it is, but, about 20. Yeah. So, but every page is so valuable. I love it. I really enjoyed reading it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, of
Yes,
course.
And so my book, An Intimate Dialogue with God, The Miraculous Power of Unconditional Self-Love, is the first book in a series. There are 3 other books, so when you put them together, it would have been a fat book, but really felt like this topic of unconditional self-love deserves its own book because it's so important, and it's something so few of us really experience fully. So, and it's just easier to read 100 pages than 400 pages. It just is.
It totally is. I think a lot of people picking up a book that looks like, 300-400 pages, 1,000 pages, it looks so daunting and overwhelming that, they put it back down again. But when you pick up something that looks like, I can have success with this. I think I could actually get, through this and then move on to the next one. I think that is a really smart way to do things. And you're right. This topic of self-love and unconditional self-love, it's a really big one, and it's super important. I don't think that a lot of people connect the dots between self-love and love in every other aspect of how we as people experience it in our relationships. I think that it's a foundational thing that gets overlooked, and people start trying to, fill voids and gaps with gathering from the outside. So I think this topic, like you said, does really deserve its own book and its own time to really delve into that subject.
Oh, yes, I agree. And, I also agree with what you said. I mean, if you ask somebody about unconditional love, of course, I think most of us will think about a parent with a young child, or maybe a new relationship, intimate relationship. But unconditional love, few people, I think, are going to say, yeah, that's my goal for myself, to love myself that way.
Right. Right. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we get into it. But I think what would be really interesting to start off with here, Noemi, is really the journey that ultimately, I think, led you to writing the book. And if I remember right, when I read it, it was about a prayer that you uttered literally on 9/11. How would you like to take us back and share with us?
Sure. So on 9/11, I was actually completing my degree to become a psychotherapist, and I was just taking a final class or two classes, and I was in the supervision group just across the river in Cambridge, Mass, just across the river from Boston, and Boston is where the planes got hijacked from. And so anyone in this area that I live in just had such a strong connection to what was going on. And so I was here in this train station waiting. And this is a time when it was about noontime, so not that far after everything happened. And no trains were coming. I was shell-shocked because I had just watched over and over again replays on the TV of the planes in the World Trade Center where my father had just retired from a few years earlier. Mm-hmm. And so I'd never experienced anything like that. It was the shock of it. Anything that was like terroristic to me was someplace far away. And I was on this train station, and it was really crowded because everything was delayed. And it was silent. And the only thing that pierced the silence was an occasional cry, a muffled sob, Mm-hmm. And I just felt so terrified because I was born and raised in New York City, and here I am living in Boston, and really impacted like doubly in a way. And I was terrified in a way I'd never been. And I just was shaking there, and I looked around, and I looked at people's faces, and I saw terror. And it was like this compound terror that I never experienced before. Mm. And yet I felt that, and yet I felt this deep compassion for people in a way that I had never experienced before. I mean, training to be a psychotherapist, of course, empathy is something that a quality that I possess, but to have that on a big scale, like at this crowded platform with hundreds of people, and I became overwhelmed with all the feelings that I was feeling, and I didn't know what to do. And somewhere deep inside of me comes this voice that speaks out loud on this quiet platform, use me for the healing of the world. It really startled me, but I felt just a smidge better, and so I kept repeating that, use me for the healing of the world. I'm here, use me. Use me, the world needs healing, and I'm available. Use me for the healing of the world. And I used that as a mantra for about 5 hours. It took a long time for the train to come and then get out of the parking lot. And then I went for a hike when I got home, just to get in the woods and get connected to nature, and where I felt closer to the divine. And I wasn't praying a whole lot at that time. I was not sensing that I was on the spiritual journey. I was going to be a psychotherapist and help people. And it was more about helping people, and I wasn't really connecting. And in that time that I connected, it really changed me. And I would think about that. It's not like all of a sudden the divine says, oh, okay, here you are. We're going to use you right now. I mean, over a decade passed, and I was a psychotherapist, and I became a soul healer, and I started, of course, I'm helping people every day, but once in a while I think about that prayer, use me for the healing of the world, and I'm like, this must be, the divine's way of using me. And it really was over a decade later that I started to hear messages from the divine. That's my favorite word for that which is all-encompassing and bigger. Some people call that God, some call it spirit, some say the universe. And I like the universe too. So the universe started to talk to me over a decade later, in which point I had pretty much filed that experience away. And I never talked about it. Really, in my book was the first time I talked about that experience.
Wow. So I mean, that's so really. I'm like, all right. You have this wonderful, beautiful message that comes at a time, that was just very unusual, shall we say, for to happen in America, and you're surrounded by masses of strangers that you were able to connect really on an emotional level with in a way you never had before. And you have this mantra and you take it with you. And then really it's not like all of a sudden a book popped out of you. It was like 10 years. You didn't go to the woods and start channeling words from God immediately. You went on with your life and with your beginning your practice as a psychotherapist. And then this started to you were starting to say the messages, then all of a sudden you were starting to get more messages, I guess, from the divine or God or, whatever.
Yeah. Okay. One of the things when I became a psychotherapist, before being a psychotherapist, I was a software engineer. So I was in the computers. I was the computer geek. And before, so I didn't have a whole lot of confidence in my ability to help someone because it wasn't like I was in a helping profession so this was a career change for me. And so I actually became very mindful in a way that I was not throughout the rest of my life when I'm sitting with somebody and I'm just mindful and I would just say, I want to help this person. I just kind of help me to help this person became kind of a mantra when I sit with someone. And not every time, but a lot of the times. And so as help me to help this person, wisdom was coming out of my mouth and I was really not hearing it before it came out of my mouth. So it was, and people would go, wow. And I'd say this, I never said that before. I said, I got to write this down. And it was just, and people were saying, that's really helpful. And so I started to experience that. And I was like, oh, I like this. This is really cool. I can help people because I've got extra help.
Channeling God's pretty cool. Yeah.
Very cool.
I would go with that. Right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, is that how you would kind of refer to it? The word channeling a little bit?
Yes, that's how I referred to it. I used to call it downloads, but then people got confused between software and, and I think I called it downloads because I used to be a software engineer. So I understood the concept of downloading and I felt like I was being downloaded. Things were coming, popping in, So, but channeling is, I'm using that now because it's more understood by people than if I say I got a download, but that's what it was like. It was like, boom, there it is.
Yeah, it is I like download. I like that a lot. And I think probably as you already, I'm sure, know that depending on who your audience is, one might be more fitting than the other, kind of reading your audience and use what the appropriate metaphor that they're most likely to get and connect the dots, right?
Absolutely.
So, okay. So as a psychotherapist, you're, like you said, trained to heal minds and emotions. And then suddenly you find yourself doing, channeling and doing soul work with your clients. So how did this channeling, so to speak, and soul work go over with your psychotherapy clients? And also, did you share that with your colleagues and what did they think?
Well, so the channeling, the channelings that I'll call them downloads there. And so the downloads that I've been getting and working with psychotherapy clients are related to healing the mind and emotions, and it would help people to have a new perspective or so it would be something that in a topic that we're talking about, and it would provide a lot of clarity for people, and it would help people shift, talking about shift. It would help people shift out of that kind of either fixation or mindset that's just been default. And so I never said this is coming from God. I said, oh, hey, I never said that before. This is pretty cool. I'm going to write it down.
Gotcha.
So, so I always respect what someone's coming for me for help. And, as a psychotherapist, of course, you're trained to embrace someone's worldview. And so I always just, wherever someone's at, I don't tell them this is a message from God. God wants you to hear this message.
Right. Right.
It comes through. And so it never became a problem in psychotherapy, and really didn't tell any colleagues that, I'm just like becoming, I'm having these brilliant things I'm saying in session. Yeah, that's not something I would tell anybody. I'd be like, yeah, she's full of herself.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like a whole lot of awkwardness going on there. I get that.
Yeah, so I didn't, but it really helped. People were getting helped, and then I would write it down, and I could use the same thing that I had said.
Sure.
And so it was helping people, and it was shifting me, because a lot of times what I was telling them was something, well, what about me? Am I being a victim here too, or, in my own life? And so it was helping me as I was helping others, which was kind of cool, because on 9/11 I was use me, and I wasn't saying use me and help me, and it was this moment of selflessness that, I'm not selfless by nature, so.
Right. Yeah. So it's so interesting. Yeah. So let's just do a little run through on the chapters. There's 5 of them, and maybe we'll just hit a couple of main points on each one, and perhaps there's a couple that I might want to take a little deeper dive into. But let's if you're up for it, let's do that.
Oh, I think that's great. I'm going to take a sip of water here.
Yeah. So while you do that, I'll just look here. The first one chapter 1 is called The Voice and the Choice. So talk to me a little bit about that. Now, so what is the voice, and what was or is the choice?
Okay. So the voice, I started, so what happened was, maybe I'll give a little background here, which I talk about in the introduction, is how then I started to really channel this body of work that's in this book. In 2012, I was on the elliptical in my living room doing a morning workout. I was really quite dedicated back then. That's something I want to get back to, but I was very dedicated back then to the morning workout, and I would listen to this affirmations recording. And so here it is pumping in my ears. You got this. Go, girl. You can do this. You're awesome. You're unstoppable. So I'm like saying these things, and all of a sudden, silence. And I'm like, oh, well, okay. I guess technology malfunction or something. And then in that silence, I heard my first message that I was so aware was completely not from me. Even when I was with psychotherapy clients, it was not something I was able to think that it was my higher self or whatever, but this message was so out of anything I would ever think. And so the message was, love is the fabric of freedom. Forgiveness paves the way to freedom. You will know when you are free, when there's nothing left to forgive, because you see through the eyes of love.
Wow.
Yeah, I just stopped right in my tracks there, got off that elliptical, wrote it down, and was, God is talking to me. I mean, at that point, it was so clear, because I was living in judgment a lot, self-judgment mostly, but judgment of other people too, probably judging everybody. And so the fabric of freedom, well, I never heard a phrase like that before. And forgiveness paving the way to freedom, I was like, oh no, forgiveness. And, but it was just an eyes of love. It's like, it just stopped me. It opened up my perception in a way that had never happened before. And I was like, this is something really amazing. And I wrote it down, and I would read that every day for, a few weeks, and then I forgot about that too. And then it wasn't until 2015 that I started to get, I was meditating at that time every day, and I still am. And that's when the channeling would come, the downloads would come in the meditation. And I started to get all of this, which led me into the beginning of chapter 1. And so the voice, to answer come back to your question, the voice was the source of this information, and I love the word source as well.
Yeah.
And so I was receiving these messages for a few months, almost every day in meditation, and I was like, well, this is really wonderful. At one point I said, okay, I really do need to know who I'm talking to. Am I talking to some kind of angel, or, what is this?
Mm-hmm.
So the answer was, I am the voice of the oneness you call God. And I just like, whoa, it just blew me away. And so that's the voice. The voice that's been speaking to me is the divine voice, and is the voice of God. And, I had some trouble just kind of owning that in public for a long time.
Yeah.
But, the messages that are in this book they changed my life receiving this so much. They eliminated so much judgment out of my life. And when judgment does come up, because it's an old pattern, I'm able to recognize it and go, do I really want to be here? Do I really want to take myself down with this? And I'm able to shift out of that. So, and the choice really is that choice that I made on 9/11, which was use me for the healing of the world. Because in this chapter, in our communication, I said, why me? Why am I getting all these messages? Because as a psychotherapist and soul healer, I'm working one-on-one with people, and that work is very private, and it's very, personal. And so it's not like I can say, hey, I worked with 35 clients this week. I have seen over 1,000 clients, and that work is private. So it wasn't like you could develop really a huge following doing it one-on-one psychotherapy like that. So for me, I didn't. I was completely somebody that if you asked somebody about me, they wouldn't have known unless they were pretty much a friend or a client. So it was this. So I said, why me? I mean, I even have friends that, have followings. Why don't, why me? The answer was, you prayed that prayer. They didn't. And, we're using them in different ways, but you asked to be used for the healing of the world. And one of the primary things that needs to be healed is the lack of love that we all have for ourselves. Because if every person on this planet loved themselves, there would be no war. There would be none of this greed and meanness that we see so much in this world. Because if you love yourself, as the Bible says, you will love your neighbor as yourself, which means if you loathe yourself, you're going to loathe your neighbor too. It just became, So in this message, the messages in this first chapter are about opening up to a bigger perspective. It talks about the purpose of the soul and why we're on this journey, and it also talks about the book series that I'm channeling, and this is the first book, of course, in the series. So it really sets the foundation for something much bigger than me loving myself. Loving myself helps the world, helps the evolution of mankind. Me loving myself helps way more than just me.
Yeah, exactly. I get that. And you're right. It's kind of the root of everything is self-love. People, if you have ample and you're full of self-love, you're not in pain of any sort. And people that are not in pain have no desire for anybody else to be in pain. So it does solve a lot of problems.
It absolutely does. And, the Buddha said that pain, physical pain is inevitable. You're going to cut yourself, you're going to get hurt, something's going to happen. But suffering is the optional thing. And suffering, Alberto Villoldo, who worked with shamans in the high Andes, says that suffering is when you wrap a story around your pain. So you become a victim of this pain. Like, somebody broke, a relationship ended and this bad thing happened to me, and you become a victim and you start suffering because we don't like to sit with the pain. So we're story spinners. We start telling stories, and that's actually in chapter 2. It talks a little bit about the story we tell ourselves. and how we are telling ourselves stories all the time, that we are storytellers. And most of the time it's just going to be this tragedy, or some people are just full of comedy, but sometimes underneath the comedy there's tragedy. And, it's not usually a love story about our life, unless we have other people that we're saying, this is the source of my love from this person and this person.
Yeah.
And
makes sense.
So, yeah.
So chapter 2, the love filter, change your filter, change your life. Tell us a little bit more about that. Change your filter.
Yeah. So this is really cool, because I never considered the concept of filter before. And so what a filter is, perception is what we see out there, which is not necessarily exactly what it is. Even I've read that our sense of colors is not exactly what is actually out there. So two people in a conversation, each one has a perception of what occurred. And so when I do couples counseling and, the couple comes in, well, things are going really well. We had this big fight. Okay, like, just on a high level, tell me what the fight was about. And person A says one thing, person B says something completely different, and then they start fighting about the fight. It's just like,
right.
Okay, hold on. Okay,
who's wrong?
It doesn't matter what it was about. We're gonna, we're gonna learn some tools.
Yeah.
In my book, I talk. There's a little passage there where the divine reminds me that I had this boss one time many years ago when I was still a software engineer, and I started to say, hey, we're doing this demo with smoke and mirrors. And he goes, doesn't matter. The perceived reality is more important than the real reality. And I was pissed. I just walked out of there. I said, that's bullshit, I said. And I walked out of there, And I was just in this place of, I was so angry. I thought, he's just trying to shut me up by saying something so ridiculous that I have no comeback. And then I realized, through the messages, the downloads in this second chapter, that perception is what we live by.
Yeah.
If you perceive somebody to be kind, you're going to experience them as kind. If you can perceive them to be a jerk, you're going to experience that. If you perceive yourself to be either of those things, that's how you're going to perceive yourself, And
right.
so, we often, so our filter is the filter is like a lens on a camera. It's
right.
what we do to what happens in our life. It's how we screen it, how we view it. Once something goes through the filter, that's what we see. And so our default filters, because of the programming that we've all had, according to the divine, are victim consciousness and judgment. So, and I've never met someone who's never had any judgment or has never experienced themselves as a victim. And so we're living by default, as Abraham would say, we live by default. We just, if we're not conscious, if we're not mindful, if we're not aware, we're just living by default. And default means we're going to see things through that lens of victimhood and judgment. And so instead of that, it was, have you ever considered filtering your life through love, through self-love, through love of others, through love? I was like, not really. I never considered that. And so in that love filter, one way to apply that is to use a couple of questions. And the first question is, what do I see when I look at this from love? And this could be myself, could be somebody else, it could be a circumstance. What do I see? I look at this from love. And for me, that's helped so much in seeing the vulnerability in someone else that I might be judging, seeing my own vulnerability, seeing, oh, okay, this person isn't trying to be mean to me. Or maybe they are trying to be mean to me, but, look at their life, look at their, what they've been through, and so much meanness that they've had to take on, that I understand where they're coming from. Doesn't mean I say it's okay to be mean, but I can say, okay, I can have compassion for the mean.
Right. Forgiveness.
And forgiveness, exactly.
Yeah.
And the second question being, what do I choose when I choose from love? So choosing from love, right? So if I'm judging somebody and I feel like I feel attacked by something they've said, and I'm judging that and I'm judging them, then I'm either going to defend or attack back.
Right.
And so what do I choose when I choose from that feeling attacked? It's going to be like, probably going to attack back unless I have, my analysis says there's no winning this one, then I'll defend or, something
retreat.
else. But retreat, yes. And my personality is not, my ego personality is not so retreatable.
Yeah.
Usually,
well,
if I'm stuck in that place. So it's going to probably defend,
Sure. And that's our conditioning.
Often, but it's usually defend.
Yeah. And that's our conditioning too, is, just as a society, I think, as humans, we've just been conditioned for attack and defend, or attack and counterattack, or attack and retreat. I mean, that's just kind of been the human condition for a long, long time.
Oh yeah, I mean, when you had to defend against, some other tribe because your food was, this is your food, you're going to starve if you don't defend. So we learned for survival, you defend and you attack.
Yeah.
You attack, if you can win, you attack. If not, you try to defend, And so it's become so conditioned within us that we don't think about our reactions. And so this love filter is really bringing awareness to how we see things and how we choose things, because we are just reacting so often. Something happens and we react and we react and we react, and we kind of have that knee-jerk reaction because that's what we've done before. And we're programmed, our brains are programmed to continue the status quo. So we're programmed to do what we've done before unless it's been really painful. Then we have the memory of the pain comes up and we're like, ooh, okay. Yeah, probably not going to say something like to the boss, like, inappropriate, because then you're going to lose a job, and maybe you've lost the job before,
Yeah, you know what the consequences are.
Exactly. So that's the thing that interrupts usually the default programming, is some big consequence. But we can choose differently. We can choose to be willing to see someone from love, to see ourselves from love, to have that compassion, to see the vulnerability instead of always seeing the this person is a mean to me.
We can make a conscious choice rather than just being in default mode, which is the patterned way.
Exactly.
Yeah, got it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And that was the very first message I received, was those two questions. And that really starting to use those, and I would hear once in a while, they call these the operative questions. Are you using your operative questions? I'd be like, oh, no, eyes of love, okay, and so I'd start to use that, and it would really, I mean, there were some people in my life that are important people that I couldn't just walk away from, that I just had a lot of judgment towards. It was like, well, why do I have to do everything, or why can't they, And it just became like seeing their struggles, seeing where they're coming from, having compassion for them. And doesn't mean that now I become a doormat, because I'm actually less of a doormat. Not that, because I can have the compassion for myself as well, and for them, and then say, this is what I need.
Yeah. So it's something that probably so many people can relate to when it comes to family dynamics, and just employing that love filter could completely shift your family dynamic to something that is, much more easy, and much less resistance and suffering and judgment, like you say. Sounds like. Yeah. Chapter 3, love yourself first.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That was like, are you kidding me? Love myself first, because I was taught to love everybody else before me, to think about everybody else's needs before my own, that this is what a good person does, and specifically a good woman is going to put everybody's needs before her own, and think about how to take care of everybody else and anticipate their needs. Oh, they're going to need this. Let me offer it before they even ask, and not really ask myself what I might need. And So one of the things that's in that chapter 3 is if you do not love yourself, you miss the entire point of life.
Yes.
Love is why you're here. Love is the truth that sets you free, but only when your love includes you. And, so loving yourself first is putting yourself on the same level as everybody else. So whoever's at the top level that you love more than everybody else, you love yourself at that level. So if you're loving your children more than everybody else, love yourself there.
Why do you think? You're at the bottom of the hierarchy there. Why do you think that is so difficult for most people?
Well, it's just we're social beings, and so many of us, I know certainly for females, but there are also many males that are programmed this way as well. Is like, right? So the female version is, be the, take care of everybody.
Right.
Do what, anticipate and so forth. And the male version, which is equally painful, is like provide for everybody.
Right.
And these are, of course, some people have the male version and they're female and vice versa, but this is the sort of
generally
more general. So provide for everybody, which means I see as a psychotherapist a lot of men in the 40s and 50s who hate their jobs, and they make lots and lots of money, and they feel totally trapped because they have to provide for their family. They've made it basically commitment that they're going to be the one, and sometimes it is the woman who's an attorney or whatever, but it's that person that's taken on that role. I have to provide for everybody. I have to be the source for everybody, or the person who has to be the rock for her family or his family. And so all of these things, we are programmed from an early age, one, by the messages we're taught, but also what we've observed from our parents and older siblings, and we're programmed to be not self-serving. And obviously there are self-serving people in this world, and I would really hope that some of them would read this book because it would really help them. But I just put that out there. But for the most part, we're taught to not be that. Most of us are taught to not be self-serving, and it's not that So I'm not saying be self-absorbed, self-centered, but put yourself in the center with everybody else.
Yeah.
Because when you don't love yourself, and most people say they love themselves, but love is demonstrated by our actions. The actions speaking louder than words. So if we don't love ourselves, we have no time for self-care. We don't take time to do something that brings us joy, or something, I really like to watch this show, but I don't have time, and I'll DVR it and I never watch it, or I like to go out with my friends once in a while, and we go to dinner and we'll catch up, but no, I've got too many things to do with the kids, and so we
out of balance. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So if there's spare, it's like if there are crumbs left, then those are for us. And so that creates a lot of people that are suffering and pain, over time, doing that for years and years and years and years, and not thinking of your own needs, not considering them, not taking care of them. It's like the oxygen mask on the airplane.
Right.
You have to put yours on first, or you're going to lose consciousness before you put it on the kids.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And it's a weird dynamic that has been programmed into us. It really is. And, I think, and this is actually a little bit bleeding over into chapter 4 here, but, since we're talking about self-love, I think maybe it's difficult for people to distinguish between the difference between being self-centered and self-love. And then I also think, so there's that, talking about, let's talk about the difference between being self-centered and having self-love. And then also, I think that sometimes people decide that, what's the word? They get confused on what kind of self-care is self-love. Like, Do you relax your standards because you love yourself? So even though you're, for example, trying to lose 50 pounds, but you're going to, you love yourself so much, you're going to let yourself eat the whole cake. I mean, you know what I mean? Because I love myself.
That is not self-love. That is
right?
self-abuse. And
yes,
that is coping. That is a coping strategy. And so,
but you know what I'm saying, right? It's
I do know what you're saying.
People can talk themselves into it. Like, oh, I love myself so much, so I'm just going to relax and I'm going to enjoy, that, fill in the blank thing that's actually,
right.
could be hard.
And I will say, because binge eating is one of my specialties as a psychotherapist, that it is not an act of self-love when you do that. Right. When you eat the whole cake, it is an act of self-abuse. And it's on either an act of self-abuse or the only thing that makes you feel better in life is that little pick-me-up in that moment. So maybe not in your whole life, but in that moment, that's the thing that you look at. Maybe everybody else is sleeping, so there's nobody to talk to, and you go down and finish that. You go for the Ben and Jerry's, and you eat the whole thing.
Yeah, it's almost like you feel like you're drowning, and that's your lifeline.
Yeah. And so because we've been taught to not put ourselves equal with everyone else, which is what love yourself first means. It's like put yourself in the first position. Doesn't mean you knock everybody down a peg. It means you love yourself in the same way that you love those that are most important, because we are important. So when we love ourselves, we have less need for that coping because we've been doing things to take care of ourselves for the day. We might, and sometimes that means you say no to somebody. People that say yes all the time, that everybody's like, oh, let's ask so-and-so, because they're always willing. Well, that always willing person may be hurting themselves by saying yes all the time.
Yeah.
And so it's really a different. There's self-care that is a slice of the cake, but it is not self-care to eat the whole cake. And and there's sometimes self-care is to not have any cake, because you're like, I feel uncomfortable in my body, and I want to feel comfortable. So I'm not going to have cake for a while, or I'll have the sliver. I'm not going to deprive myself, but that piece, that slice is huge. I'm going to have a quarter of that slice. And so it becomes actually thinking about what is the kindest thing you can do for yourself here.
Yeah.
And so there's in chapter 3, there's the statement that I was given to fill in every day is, I love myself enough to ... So I love myself enough to eat the whole cake. I love myself enough to have a sliver so I can taste it. And I'm also looking at the fact that I'm feeling uncomfortable in my body. My clothes don't fit. And I really want to feel comfortable. And,
Yeah. Which is another thing I like. You have the wonderful little notes at the end of each chapter that a person can use to help, kind of retrain their thinking and practice that they've just read about, which is wonderful. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about the ego, and you talk a lot about that in your book. And I love the subject of the ego because it is such a big fat subject, and it's
yes, it is.
It's a big fat subject about a big fat thing that we all come into this world with, apparently. And what is up with it? Why do we all have one? The ego gets a bad rap, understandably, but is there any aspect of it that's good? What do we need to know about this thing?
Okay. So first, number one thing to know is that you are not your ego. We learn to associate ourselves with our ego. So in chapter 4, the title of that is You Are Uniquely Loved. Not loved with a D, but love. You are love. We all are love, but we are all unique. So it's not just like, oh, we're all the same. On some level, we're all the same. On a really important level, we're all unique. And so we have learned about uniqueness through the ego. And the ego is necessary to survive in our world. So we can't, it's sort of like a layer of skin, another layer or something that gives us protection. It's like applying the sunscreen, so you're out you're protected from intense
Okay.
sun. So the ego is something like that. And so we need it. But when you identify yourself as that, and we have an identification problem as a species, right? We identify ourselves, I am a psychotherapist, I am a soul healer, that's who I am. Well, it's what I do, it's not who I am. And so I am a mother, I am a child, I am, we think we identify with those roles.
The roles,
Yeah, and it's not, that's not who we are. So the ego, we also over-identify ourselves with the ego. We think we are our ego. And our ego is that extra layer of protection, just like the sunscreen that we put on in this world to exist, to survive, which is the ego's first and foremost goal is to survive, right? We have to survive. We developed an ego to make sure that extra layer, it's like the extra layer of skin, like the sunscreen, something that we put on to protect. And then if we can survive, now we want to be special. We want to stand out in some way, shape, or form, because being special is very important to the ego. And one of the things that I love about in Chapter 4 is that the Divine says we are all uniquely special, and that who we really are is that we're uniquely love, L-O-V-E, not loved, but love. Our essence is love. The truth of who we are is love. Underneath that extra layer called the ego, way down, deep down inside, we are love. That is the divine, the seed of the divine that's in us is love.
Yeah.
So we are that. We are that, and we're uniquely that, because nobody has had the same exact experience that we've had. Nobody has that same exact perception, and it's our uniqueness that's really important. And so the ego helps us to notice that. Our uniqueness is important, but getting in touch with the uniqueness as love, getting in touch with the uniqueness as the essence of who we are, and living from that place, it's kind of a vulnerable thing to do. It's saying, I'm not going to make all my choices from ego, or at least this next choice, I'm going to go and see what my heart wants to do, what really resonates with me at a deep level, rather than reacting from ego, because ego is a reactor. It reacts. And
I would like to ask you to explain what you mean by, what's the difference between the true self and true essence? I know that you use those references in there, and how the ego comes into play there, but they're different. So tell us about that.
Yes. So the true self is who we truly are, which is this timeless spiritual being that's sitting here in a human body. So the first layer is the human body. The second layer is this ego. So we've got layers over us, because we are so much bigger than this physical container that we live in. And so we are this big, amazing being of divine and coming into human. And so the first container is the body, and then we have the ego container. So the truth self is the truth of who we are. And so it is that we are not our ego, but we don't know who we are unless we are willing to even consider, if I'm not my ego, who am I? And start to get to know ourselves. Because the problem is we don't really know ourselves. We know ourselves as ego. So
we know ourselves as our personalities too.
Yes, our personalities, which are unique. That is the ego uniqueness. So I'm glad you brought that up. That's the ego's version of uniqueness. Well, my personality is larger than life, and that's me. Or, I have a self-deprecating personality, or a caring for others personality. And so we know ourselves in that level, and that is the outermost level,
Yeah.
So to actually know yourself as more than that. And so sometimes I'll give clients this exercise. What's lovable about me is, and you've got to do at least 10 items. 20 is better.
Yeah.
And they can't do it, or they can get 2 or 3. And so I say, ask people. I had one young woman who was active on social media come in with 138 distinct things that were lovable about herself because she put it out there. Mm-hmm. And she's like, I cannot believe this. This is what people say. They must be crazy. I said, no, well, maybe not. Since they're saying this, it's probably true because they know you better than you know you. And so the truth of who we are, other people can sometimes say, oh, you're so compassionate.
Yeah.
And,
it's surprising sometimes what you get back that you don't expect when you ask other people a question like that about yourself. It's very enlightening.
It is enlightening. And so, I did that exercise once a long time ago, and I heard all this in some kind of workshop I did. And the things I heard from people were just like, are you kidding? That can't be. But I was hearing the same thing from multiple people. I was like, oh.
Yeah. And then there's there's the thing where you think you're something, and then all the feedback comes back, no, I don't see that in you at all. And you're like, well, what the heck? I thought I was, but not so much, kid. Anyway.
Well, and that can also be what you project out into the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I did this workshop once. I went through a phase where I was doing a lot of these personal growth workshops. So I went through this workshop. You stand up in front of the room, and everybody at the beginning, the very first day, and everybody shouts out what they see about you. So, and I'm standing there, and so I get somebody going, too soft, and the next person goes, too hard, too this, too that. It was all a whole bunch of contradictory, opposite stuff, and I was like, wow, what am I had enough sense to know this is what I'm projecting. Some people are seeing it this way, and some people are seeing that way, and maybe one moment I'm hard, and the next moment I'm soft, and it just seemed like, wow, it was eye-opening. Like, which one of these do I really want to project?
Well, plus, as you talked about earlier, they're all seeing you and what you're projecting through their own filters. So they're going to receive you differently. Yeah. It's so fun. Okay.
It's so fun. So the true essence then is that aspect of the true self, of the truth of who you are, that's unique, that's us, that's uniquely us. No two people, even if you have the same worldview, the same values, are going to be 100% the same, because we all have different experiences. And so that true essence is the truth of who we are. And at one point in my journey through all this, I was told I'm a gracious, loving presence. And I have to tell you, I wanted to barf. I was like, I cannot embrace that. Firstly, gracious, I don't feel gracious. I feel judgmental. Loving, okay.
Noemi, your last name is Grace. I mean,
I know. But
I'm just saying.
Yeah, so that's in your face, right? The last name of Grace. But it just didn't. And Noemi means sweet. So, and I really didn't. When I found out what my name meant, when I was an adolescent, I was like, this is bad. I'm going to rename myself, So, and presence, like, what kind of thing is that, So it is the truth, but the more, and so when I was told that I was that, I started to use that as a mantra. I am a gracious, loving presence. And it shifts me. So sometimes when I'm feeling irritable, agitated, because I'm still human. We're all human. Yeah. We're all going to have moments where we're not seeing through eyes of love.
Sure.
And I can just say I'm a gracious, loving presence, and I say that over and over again because I've learned to embrace that, and it shifts me. It changes me. So it's really, I love chapter 4 because it tells us that we're so much bigger than we think we are, and yet we're uniquely beautiful and wonderful in a way that most of us would not think of ourselves. And when we can discover that unique essence, that true essence, it really, and owning that, it just has the power to shift you big time without you having to do a lot of work. Yeah,
it doesn't have to be hard, does it?
No, it doesn't, but that's not what we've learned.
No,
it's like no pain, no gain kind of a thing that we've been taught,
Well, you're right, and we think somehow it's more valuable if it's harder to attain. But again, that's just programming, I think. It doesn't have to be, we just love to make things overcomplicated and difficult for ourselves, don't we? I guess it just gives us all something to do. But
well, it's just the ego complicates things. It just does, because it's the ego is very conniving and strategizing and all of that. So it does complicate things. This person can't just really be telling me what they're telling me. There must be something else. They're doing something kind for me. It must be that they want something from me, or the ego is always looking for that ulterior motive, that meaning, that that hidden meaning kind of a thing.
Yeah. So, okay. So before we move on to the last chapter, the last point about the ego that I think I'd like to leave people with is, one of the things that you say when you're talking about discerning your true self from the ego is, yes, ego limits you, but ego is not bad, and it has its necessary place. Now,
Absolutely.
So even though we may not need our ego to protect us from, running from lions and, warring neighboring tribes, not here anyway. But how do we collaborate with our ego so that we are using it in our best interest and not letting it use us?
Right. Great question, and so in the book, the Divine talks about how the ego is actually very gifted and has a lot of skills. It's developed a lot of skills to serve us, because its primary motive being survival and then specialness. And so it's trying to serve us, and so it's developed a lot of skills. So the best use of the ego is to use it as needed, to have it be your ally and not your master. So not have it calling the shots, but just be, okay, I need the ego. So
yeah.
I have this new car, and it has this strange, I came at 9:00 at night coming home from work, and there's moisture inside the rear window. And I'm like, this is not supposed to be happening. I mean, this is a new car. Mm-hmm. And, so I go in there, and and I took it in for my first service, and I told them about this. And they're like, well, if you run the air conditioner all the time, it should be fine. I said, well, I'm not going to run the air conditioner with 10 degrees. And secondly, this is a problem, and my car is under warranty. And while you don't know, it's a very strange problem, may not know what to do, we need to figure out a time that I can drop it off, and you guys can research this, because, so if I just just run the air conditioner, I might be getting a mold problem in my car. It's like, we need that ego. We need to assert ourselves sometimes, but it's always that knee-jerk reaction. The knee-jerk reaction is always an ego reaction. So,
okay.
And those people were very nice. I mean, they were, the car dealer was very nice, and they agreed with me, and, because I was able to use the ego not from an angry place, or I can't believe you're just telling me to run the air conditioner every day, or
Yeah.
And,
okay.
And so I was able to use the ego, say, okay, ego, I need you, and so using that to take a stand and to say, no, this is not okay with me. This is not acceptable for me. This is not going to work. And so,
okay. I get it.
So there's times, so we need the ego. If somebody's coming at us with our ego, we might see them with eyes of love and see the vulnerability and all of that, but we may sometimes need to also put on that layer, put on the sunscreen layer, put on the ego layer, and say, yeah, that's really not okay with me.
Right.
The way you're talking to me is not okay with me.
Yeah,
right?
that makes
yelling. The ego I see you with eyes of love. I don't mind it. So you can yell. No, it's disrespectful to yell at someone, and the way you're talking to me is not okay. And so it's really learning to live more from who we are, and knowing when do I need to bring out that skill, which is the ego that's going to be self-protective.
Mm-hmm.
When do I need to be a little self-serving, and knowing when to bring that out and to take a stand.
Yeah, that makes sense. Which is, that perfect word that you used when we were talking about this section in the book, discernment, discerning
Absolutely.
when that is. Yes. Yeah. Okay.
And it's so important. And one of the things I've learned for myself, when I absolutely feel like I have to say something, I can't hold it back. I can't wait. I can't sleep on it because I won't be able to sleep because it's so important. It's so vitally important. That's my ego, and it's not vitally important, and I'm going to regret it. So I need to find a way to put it to the side for a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's hard. It's hard because
Yeah.
they're plugged into it. I need to tell them how I feel about this, and
Right.
and if
That's
I
not
tell them
always
that
true.
way,
Right. Because then you have to ask yourself, is that really true? Is that really, really true that I have to do this? So yeah, there is a very conscious collaboration you need to have between yourself and your ego self, for sure.
Absolutely. And just being conscious. And, in that moment, it was almost like I wasn't saying I'll pull out my ego when I was talking to the dealer, the service people, but I just was like, still coming from that gracious presence that I am, but saying that's really not okay. This is a problem,
Yeah. Thanks, but no thanks. That doesn't work for me. So new strategy. All right.
Exactly.
All right. Chapter 5, the self-acceptance miracle. All right. So,
okay.
All right. Well, why is acceptance such a powerful thing? Yeah. Let's talk about that for a minute.
It's such a powerful thing because in acceptance, you embrace without judgment what is. And so when we don't accept, we're back to that default filter of judgment and victim consciousness. And in acceptance doesn't mean you make it okay. It means that you're not fighting it. You're not resisting it. Somebody may get a medical diagnosis that's not one that you ever want to get. If you don't accept it at some level, you're fighting it. No, I'm not sick. I'm going to, I'm still going to go climb mountains and do all this stuff. Well, and now, you need a knee replacement, but you're going to climb mountains. It's going to cost you. So, in that acceptance is just the surrender, which is not like giving up the white flag. It is like saying, I'm not going to fight this. I'm not going to waste my energy on this. This is something that is. It is what it is. It is here. To resist this is wasting a lot of my energy and time, And so that's the stuff that we don't want to accept that we look at negative. But in the chapter, you'll also see that there's a lot of stuff that's really wonderful that we want to accept. Like when I was told I was the gracious, loving presence and wanted to barf, I can't accept this. This is like a little too much. This is not how I experience myself, And so when I start to learn to accept that changed me. And so acceptance, it talks about acceptance being a miracle because it changes us. A miracle is a change within us, Course in Miracles talks about the change in perception being a miracle. And so when something changes within us on its own, that's a miracle. So when we accept, now things are the landscape is different. I see everything so differently. And we've been taught to not accept. We've been taught to not accept because we've been taught that we're not acceptable. We are, oh, you did that thing? Very bad. Shame on you. And we've all been taught that. It's not that our parents were bad or anything. It's just what we learned. What we learn, we do. So when we teach. And so we've been taught that we're not completely acceptable, and therefore we can't accept ourselves. We must reject those parts of ourselves that we wish were different.
So it's very closely related to approval, isn't it? Self-approval, approval from others. It's very closely related to approval then. Yeah. In a way, approving of yourself, wanting approval from others. It's like they're kind of related.
Right. But you can accept things that you don't like. So you don't have to say, I approve of this. It's just like it is what it is. Every once in a while, I get reactive and I say something I regret. Okay, just, that thing happened. I did it. I accept that I did that. I'm not really patting it on the back and say I approve, but I'm not disproving either. And it's more of a neutral stance, like, okay, here it is. Okay, so I did that. Yep, oops. Didn't listen, just cut off my husband, didn't listen to what he had to say, thought I knew what he had to say, and I said, I don't want that,
Yeah.
And then found out, actually I do want that, but I didn't listen, so.
Right.
Kind of just being, okay, so, yep, I was impatient, and so I accept that.
Okay.
Not that I want to be impatient, so it is slightly different, but approval is in that kind of duality of good, bad thing. Okay, so this is an okay thing. And
Okay.
It's not that it's not okay, but it's just more neutral. It's like, okay, so I was impatient. Yeah, I don't really want to be impatient, so I'm going to bring more awareness to that and recognize that when I feel that urge inside of me to just shout, or not shout, but just say no, like I better listen before I open my mouth. I'm going to put my foot in my mouth.
Yeah, and acceptance, just to clarify, I think for listeners too, acceptance doesn't necessarily mean that you don't, moving forward, want to make any changes. That's not what acceptance is about, right?
That's
it's
correct.
about like owning the thing or owning the moment or accepting what is without resistance. And then you can make a clear, conscientious choice moving forward if you need to make a change.
Right. And so in this impatient example, and I use that because I have been known to be that at times, if I own it, I'm not defending myself. I was like, oh, I didn't listen. You didn't listen to me. You're right. I didn't listen. I got hasty. I thought I knew what you're talking about. And you know what? Actually, I was triggered. And to own that, I got triggered and I leaped to a conclusion that was not accurate. And I'm really sorry about that. And so you can apologize, when you can own something in a way that isn't like scraping skin off of you. It's just like, it's just like, oh, yeah, I really was impatient. I was hasty,
Right.
Yep, that is I get it. I've done that before. It is a pattern. I'm working on it. I'm going to bring more awareness if I can next time.
Yeah, I love that. So, Noemi, what would you tell other people who would like to have this same type of relationship and connection and receive this type of communication from source, or as you like to say, the divine, so clearly and directly as you've been able to do?
Well, that's a great question. And actually, I had this yearning when I read Conversations with God when it first came out.
Yeah.
I threw like a little bit of a temper tantrum. How come I can't? No, I want this. Why should he have it? What about me? I believe in God. I want to have a conversation with God. And I was like really wanting that. And so if you're really wanting something, firstly, like some people will read it and go, well, that's really kind of neat. Oh, okay. And other people go like, oh, I want that,
Yeah.
And, then if we have that strong desire, then that means that we got to honor that desire. We have to recognize, okay, if I really want that, that's the true self. That's the truth of me going, yes, that's for me. And so, wanting to have that, you have to learn to start to listen, right? So I started to listen in my psychotherapy sessions, and even when I wasn't listening in my life, and I started to listen to the synchronicities, the different things that were happening, coincidences, things that people were saying to me, oh, you really have so much compassion. You could really help people. And I'm thinking, I'm a software geek. I don't have compassion, And so you start to listen. If you want to listen to God, if you want to listen to Source Divine, if you want to be able to hear that, start listening. Start listening to what's going on, not from the ego, but from the deeper place, from the heart. Start to listen to what you're not hearing in your life, because we're all not hearing things, because there's so many messages coming at us.
Yeah.
And but listen. Let's start to listen to what's your truth. Start to listen to maybe what the other person isn't telling you, but because it's too vulnerable for them, start to listen to what's happening around you, and have that desire, and just say, someday I'm going to talk to God. Just own it, claim it. Someday I'm going to talk to Source. I'm going to channel Source. I'm going to have this relationship with the divine, and also then you have to also be willing to put some time into this relationship, right? If you want to have a relationship with somebody, and you don't spend, I'm too busy for them, but I want to have a relationship with them, it's not going to happen. So it's kind of also making time.
Good point. Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Meditation or reading some kind of a spiritual book, or, things that will take you to that deeper place.
Yeah, yeah. You have to do something to cultivate the relationship. You can't just, you know, put out the ask, but then continue on, you know, filling your time 100% with everything but cultivating that.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, do you have a going rogue story for me, Noemi?
I do, and it's very related to what I just said about listening. So as I've alluded to, I was a software engineer for a long time. I got a master's in computer science way back when, and I was doing this career, and at first it was fun. It was kind of interesting and cool to do these, figure out how to do the software and write these programs. And then after a while, it's just like, another programming language, another program. It's like, And I'm sitting there waiting for the bug, waiting for the thing to crash, sitting there staring at the screen for hours on end. And I was just feeling really dead on the inside, even though I was making a lot of money. And I started to travel a lot on business by myself and sitting in airports. People started to approach me in airports. I'm sitting in some cafeteria in an airport that's empty, and people would come and say, "Hey, can I sit? Is that seat taken?" I'm thinking, why are they going to sit with me? There's all these tables that are empty. But I'm like, "Oh, no, go ahead." And then they start telling me their life story. And at the end, and this happened at least half a dozen times, and the last time it happened, it was with my boss who I was traveling on a business trip with, and they said, "You would make a great therapist. Are you a therapist? You would make a great therapist." And I was like, my boss told me I'd make a great therapist. I thought, oh, boy, you're in trouble because that's where I'm going. So I started to recognize that, okay, I'm hearing this from strangers. Maybe there's some truth to it. And, and then I started to really consider that. I knew a few people who were therapists, and I talked to them about, do you love your job? And then I looked into programs, master's programs in psychology. And then I was just really, really, really depressed in my life, and I thought, I cannot continue with this. And I thought I can load myself up with a bunch of meds, or if I don't, I'll probably go to the hospital at some point, or I can make a change in my life. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't take psych meds, because a lot of my clients do, and they are valuable. But for me, the depression was more circumstantial. It was more like I just hated my life rather than purely biochemical. I just looked at it and I thought, this is meaningless. This is just so empty, and this is just so painful to get up every single morning and go sit and wait for that program to crash and find the bug and fix it, or So so after a few of these, and I just decided I would take one course in counseling. And so I did that. And after that one course, it was just like I fell in love with it. So I came into my boss's office and said, "Remember that trip to Germany that we took and that conversation we had?" And he's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Well, I'm taking you up on your suggestion, and I am going to school to be a psychotherapist." Wow. And everybody thought I was crazy. I was like, "What? You're making really good money. You're not going to make much money. You're going to be in school. You're not going to make any money." And it was, my family was blown away, because I was always a straight A student, and so I did that in psychotherapy school as well. But it was like, why would you do this? This is not a financially prudent decision. And it was like, it might not be, but this is a saving my life decision. If I don't want to be, and it was something, and I was fortunate that I was able at the time. This is before stock market crashes, multiple stock market crashes, that I could finance myself to go to school. And it took a long time for people to really think it was a good idea, till they saw how happy I was working as a psychotherapist, and then I became a soul healer, and so it took a long time for family and friends I think the friends were more supportive, but the family was like, "What has gone with her? She was always saying she's going to make $1 million before she's 40, and
Now she's totally done a pivot and is going in a different direction we never saw coming. That's wild.
Yeah.
It's wild.
And so, but I was listening. I was hearing all these people telling me, and while it may sound in my retelling of it that it was obvious because so many people told me I'd be a therapist, but this was over the course of like 8 months and just random conversations that were, I guess, not random, but easy to dismiss, But I would make a great psychotherapist. And I was in a women's group at the time, and I brought that to their attention, and they said, yeah, you would make a great psychotherapist. And I thought, I think I would really like that a whole lot better.
Well, it sounds like the universe. It sounds like you were getting a lot of hints and guidance, and you decided to heed the calling, and now here you are. Tight with God.
Tight with God. God's my bestie.
Right. That's awesome. That's a great story. I love it. I really enjoy when people share things like that with the listeners, because I think, so many people do find themselves just sort of in like this current, and they just don't think that they can get out of it, or they shouldn't get out of it, or they're afraid to. And, I think when we share the stories of, when we do those things, and that it is possible to make a drastic change and kind of go rogue, things can turn out better than you may have imagined if you just, rise to the challenge and muster up the courage and just do it.
Yeah, and listen to, like, if you are in, like, I was so, like I said, dead on the inside. Life was just so, it was meaningless. It was, so purposeless for me. And I felt like I was dying every day. So barely could pull myself out of bed, so to continue to live my life. And so to listen to those things, and then opens, and not, maybe life is challenging and you kind of need that job. So I'm not saying everybody should quit their job. But finding maybe there's another avenue to create that sense of meaning and fulfillment for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. Noemi, where can people find out more about you and connect with you and find your book?
Sure. So my book, An Intimate Dialogue with God, The Miraculous Power of Unconditional Self-Love, is on Amazon. And right now that's where you can buy it. And love to hear from anybody. You can certainly contact me through my website, noemigrace.com, or my Facebook author page, Noemi Grace Author, if you look for that. And you can certainly contact me that way. And something else that's new and I'm really thrilled about is that I have a radio show now, and on Om Times Radio, and I'm channeling live answers to people's burning questions right on air. So
wow,
it's Access to Angels and Grace. So Access to Angels and Grace on Om Times Radio. And so if any of the listeners are feeling stuck or uncertain of next steps or finding certain areas of your life is challenging, you can get an answer from the divine by going to Om Times Radio's website and seeing how to contact us, because I have a co-host, Lisa Berry, and let us know that you would like to have an answer channeled live for you. So those are the ways people can find me and find out more about me.
Wow, that is super cool. I'm going to have to check that out. I love that.
Oh, yeah.
Access to Angels and Grace. Sweet. That's wonderful. I will definitely be checking that out. I hope everyone else does too. So one last question before I let you go, Noemi. What would you like to share with our listeners about the value of going rogue?
I just can't even imagine how I would have survived my life if I hadn't been willing to make that step. And it's like being willing, you can't figure it all out. And going rogue, there's a level of trust. It is that kind of leap of faith. It is the willingness to choose the unknown because the known is really, really not satisfying you. And it just changed my life. I mean, if I had stayed as software geek, I'm sure I would have been through many unemployments, but really just having no joy in my life. This has brought so much joy. So it's that willingness to say, yeah, I do deserve better. I do deserve to feel better. I do deserve to have a more fulfilling life. And, and not to be impulsive with it, but to you don't have to figure it out all in your head, but to be open to see the options, to see what's available, like the psychotherapy messages that were coming at me.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you very much. This has been delightful. And wow, we actually, we spent a lot of time on this. You shared so much good
a lot of time, yes.
Yeah. This was great though. So I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it, Noemi. Thank you so much for everything today. And everyone, thank you for hanging out with Noemi and I today. I hope that you enjoyed our very delightful conversation. If you, and listeners, if you love like the Conversation with God books by Neale Donald Walsch, if you love A Course in Miracles, if you're a fan of Abraham Hicks or the writings of people like Marianne Williamson or Byron Katie, then you will absolutely love An Intimate Dialogue with God, The Miraculous Power of Unconditional Self-Love by Noemi Grace, because it is just, it's like a recipe that has a little dash of all of those things in it, and then your own experience, and it's just delightful. So I hope our listeners check it out. And everyone, I encourage you to share this show, the link, if you think that you know somebody that would benefit by hearing some of these words of wisdom. Just share the good shift, and make sure to subscribe if you haven't already done so. And of course, the rating always lights me up. As a personal performance coach, I'm also happy to help you make some shift happen in your own life. So if you want to find out what private coaching with me is all about, just head on over to LoreeBischoff.com, or you can find me on any of the social media platforms. So thanks for listening, everybody. Until we meet again, stay feisty, my friends, and go make some shift happen. That goes for you too, Gary B.
The preceding podcast was a TJ DeSantis production. Comments, questions, and inquiries can be directed to DeSantisProd@gmail.com.